so many things in the book that you hadn't shared before.
All right, good.
But I'm wondering if,
Oh,
you know,
I think I got my aperture out of whack here. Hold on.
And we haven't specifically.
There we go. It's a little better. It's a little blown out. All right, this is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion House, New Mexico, working on oil painting Death of a Salesman. All right, today I'm just going to hit it with a very thin layer of yellow, bright lemon yellow with a little bit of white mixed into it for opacity, glaze, across the background and middle ground, leaving the foreground elements cut clean to taper into a lessening of the density of fog as you move into the foreground. So here we go.
How did you get into this line of work? So the best answer is research is me-search, right? I was interested in understanding my life, and I found on the way to study it experimentally. With psychedelics and their effects on the mind. So, so I think it's an answer, to how I got into this line of work. And they're good stories. I like telling stories, and there's some good stories. And I think perhaps most important is to give a more nuanced account of altered states. They're not all good, they're not all bad, they're not anything other than mind manifesting. So after each of these experiences, which I recount, I have a commentary section which describes or discusses how that state came about. Like, for example, the active intellect and the medievalists, or psychopharmacology and the default mode network, or alcohol's effects on neurotransmitters. So it's an opportunity, or it's an example of how you can kind of look at your life through the perspective of the altered states that have really stood out, which means you need to pay attention to your altered states. You need to write them down, think about them, look at them, talk about them with people, and see what their influence has been. What kind of information you glean from them. So I guess, those are the reasons. People can order, books, through me and, through my website. And I inscribe them before I send them out. And, one of the inscriptions that I've been, finding myself including is never stay down for long. So that seems to be like a meme that's coming out vis-a-vis this book, and interacting with people about it.
Yeah, that has a lot of practical uses. That's definitely a good inscription. You never know what you're going to catch people in, what kind of ruts, what kind of situations. But one of the things I love about it is that it's so easy to get complacent in life, and when you're getting complacent, or even if you're just getting overwhelmed with the things that you have to do, one of the easiest things to dispense with or make excuses to not do is this kind of exploration. Like you've really got to make it a priority in your own life, or you're just going to find yourself not doing it. Like before this retreat that I just did, I even got to this point of feeling a little bit like a fraud, because I'm talking about this stuff intellectually all the time. Like, this is my job to talk about this stuff. And I was finding myself being like, I haven't had an impactful consciousness-based experience in like a couple of years at this point, and I really need to get into the field. Stop talking about it intellectually. Like, turn the frontal lobe off and experience it. Be in these states. And every time I do that, I'm so just almost embarrassed that I haven't been doing it more. And I feel like your book is a not that every story is positive by any means, or it's all like, sunshine and rainbows and but it does just show that there is this fertile, novel, interesting, soul-nourishing possibilities out there, and such a variety of experiences that people can have.
Yeah, well, good. I'm happy to hear that. It was a bit of a risk, getting that book out there, and it was no fun going through some of those hairy chapters. Yeah, like, oh man, was I crazy or what? Yeah, so, and those accounts obviously I toned down, and I removed some of the disgusting parts. Like I want people to feel empathy, but not like disgust.
Mm-hmm.
So I removed the disgusting parts. But still, I felt good once the book was done. Like I really processed a lot of stuff, and I was able to approach it, like almost clinically, like a case report, and then you discuss the case after you eat those episodes. So. And I think there are some, some humorous parts in there. Like the steak on acid chapter. That's pretty hilarious. I came back after LSD in the mountains, and I had steak in the cafeteria, and I stabbed it, and it was like squirming and pulling away from me. And I was a vegetarian for a number of years after that, to be honest. So there's some pretty good stories.
Before I let you go, what research do you want to see done? Now that we've got, we're deep into this, what everybody's calling like the psychedelic renaissance, or at the very least, it's much easier to actually do this research and ask some of these questions. Mm-hmm. What are you hoping to see? What are you curious to see?
Well, there's a couple things, I guess, and like once we got off the call, I think of this probably. One of them is to, crack the DMT synthesizing machinery. What turns on endogenous synthesis of DMT. So I think then we'll be able to start asking, what is the role of endogenous DMT? Is it a way for the soul to leave the body as you die? Is it responsible for dreaming? Is it responsible for psychosis?
Yeah.
What happens if your levels are very low? Does that mean you're depressed? What happens if you blockade the production of endogenous DMT? So I think the role of endogenous DMT and what regulates it is very important. I think at a more broad level, we need to know how psychedelics work. And if you think about how or what psychedelics are doing, they seem to be panaceas. So you get what you're looking for. If you're depressed, you'll get less depressed. If you want to be creative, you'll be more creative. If you want to be a Charles Manson serial killer, you'll be more convinced that that's the path for you, and understand why it's right for you to pursue it. And when you're speaking about panaceas, you're talking about the placebo effect.
Right.
You have an expectation, and you are given a drug, and certain things occur which you were hoping to occur. So the placebo effect isn't imaginary. It's not all in your mind. There's a lot of biological concomitants of a placebo response. If you do placebo analgesia with hypnosis, let's say, and you give an opiate blocking drug, the analgesia goes away. So placebo is a real biological thing, and psychotherapy could be even seen as a placebo, kind of treatment. And with effective psychotherapy, there's brain changes. So the placebo response is a real marshaling of the body's innate healing mechanisms. So I think that psychedelics will shed light on the placebo response, which I think is occurring all day long, every day in everybody's life. Like there are certain things which occur in your life that convince you of certain ideas or certain ways of being or of relating with the world, and the majority of experiences over the course of the day, they don't really register. So one of the most interesting aspects of psychedelics is they're feeling more real than real.
Right.
And like another term is meaningfulness enhancement. They enhance the meaning of particular experiences. and I think the placebo response, on it, hinges on the experience being meaningful, profound, more real than real. So if you could marshal the placebo response with psychedelics, you would open up this huge panorama of treatments for placebo-responsive conditions, which are most of the psychiatric disorders, autoimmune diseases, inflammatory diseases, all kinds of things which show a strong placebo response. So I think rather than being entheogenic or psychotomimetic or whatnot, they may enhance the placebo response. And understanding the placebo response, which is the translation of a subjective experience into a biological one, will help bridge the explanatory, gap, which is the black hole between subjective experience and psychopharmacology. I think that if psychedelics can help us understand the placebo response, which is the translation of psychology into biology, I think will open up a new way of looking at the mind-brain complex.
Right, yeah, all those questions. I've thought of many of those too. And yeah, that relationship between the placebo and what we call the placebo, really this faculty in the mind that is it's like a non-literal switch or something. It's like something that can somehow be accessed through a mixture of intention and input, where the input itself is not the cause of the change, and then there's this like tertiary factor of the mind that somehow plays a role that we don't understand, that seems to be always hidden just around the corner, and we can see the effect of it, but we can't figure out how to directly interact with it. Do you have any additional thoughts on the placebo?
That's them in a nutshell. Yeah. The placebo response is a bridge, between the mind and the body, which has yet to be fully understood. It's incomprehensible.
Yeah.
It occurs behind the scenes too.
Right.
You have no idea you're activating your brain's own mind-brain complex innate healing properties or mechanisms. It might end up being incomprehensible and invisible, but I think we can understand it somewhat better and even utilize it. It also can be utilized for the wrong reason. You can convince certain people of certain things being true, and for them it's true, and they could be malignant ideas or malignant courses of action. But if it is going to be studied and applied, then it's up to us to be moral in our application.
Definitely. Yeah, it starts to feel like you're bordering on magical territory when you're starting to play with these unseen switches in that are deep, that have a deep impact on people's psyche and their body potentially. It's almost like black magic if you wield it in the wrong way.
Yeah, well, of P.K. Dick's work, right? Yeah. One of my favorite books of his is The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, and it's about the competition between two psychedelics for world domination.
Oh wow.
One is a compound made on Earth, and it's a typical escapism kind of psychedelic. You enter into the world of Perky Pat, who's this little doll, and you interact with her friends, and you go to her house, and you hang out and all that. The other is this extraterrestrial, interstellar psychedelic, which is completely weird. You take it and you never really come down. You do come down, but you're still like in another trip, and then you come down from that trip, and you're in another one, and it's a terrifying description of how psychedelics can go really wrong forever. So I think it's crapshoot right now. How this information is going to be applied.
Yeah. Fascinating. This whole conversation has been absolutely fantastic. It's an honor to have you back here. So excited for your new book. And just thank you for doing it. Let's do it again.
Well, sure, Mike. Yeah, it's great. I'd like to wait another 8 years.
Yes, agreed.
Say that like it's bad. It was frightening with love. Really? Was the only part of what I thought was fun?
First of all, it's both cool and fun and great to be with you, in part because 50% of the staff on our show are connected to this educational institution. We Tom Malad is the executive producer of Intercepted, and Elise Swade, who's here somewhere, who's just hired on as our production assistant, who's a recent graduate of SVA. If any of you listen to our podcast or look at our webpage, the increasingly awesome graphics that we have for each episode, with apocalyptic images of Trump as the mushroom cloud in Nagasaki, or today's with Trump as the frat boy at the door, and the bird who's knocking on the door trying to get the black guy from the white people so you can tell him it's part of his purging. Elise creates all of that magic in very, very quick turnaround times too. We throw the most bizarre concepts at her. She's never complained. So it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Which when you're saying like, what would it look like if Donald Trump was the baby on Notorious B.I.G.'s ready to die on him? And Elise is like, here are 4 options. Finding a baby body for Donald Trump for that one, it was a particularly creepy one, so it was quite an adventure. We went through several headless baby bodies before we found an appropriate one for Donald Trump. She had to orange it up a little bit and plump him out, but it all worked out in the end. I'll tell you one funny story about Lital, who some of you may have been in classes with. I won't tell that story about what your son did last night. Had nothing to do with it, but there was an incident with her son that she felt she needed to share with all of us on our work-related Slack channel. When I first sort of agreed to do a podcast, on the one hand, I was really excited because I started my life in journalism on the technical side of radio and really fell in love with creating pictures people would never see, audio pictures. And I love the medium of radio, and I learned how to edit on reel-to-reel tape, the old reel-to-reel, and it's so magical the way that you create sound essays with the old reel-to-reel tape. And I was trained in cutting tape by a journalist named Amy Goodman, who's the host of the show Democracy Now! And Amy Goodman was the single best tape editor, like actual analog tape editor that I've ever seen. She was phenomenally good at it. And there were all these little tricks that you could do by slicing the tape in one direction to create a fade if you didn't have the ability to take it from one deck to the other deck. And so the first part of what I did in my life as a journalist was to become infatuated with creating audio images for people. And I was working at the old WBAI on industry embarrassing about the problem. And it was on 8th Avenue, right across the street from Madison Square Garden. It's on the 35th floor of this building, and I'm from the Midwest. I had just sort of come to New York. I had engaged in a full-on stalking campaign with Amy Goodman. Not creepy stalking, but a good kind of stalking. And unlike Mike Pence, I can be in a room with a woman who's not my wife and not be afraid that I'm going to have some horrible, sinful moment. People don't want to talk about Mike Pence cannot be in a room with a woman who's not his wife unless another person is in the room. It's totally true. We have a Christian jihadist as our vice president who has more in common with the Taliban than any student at SVA, than we have with any student at SVA. But when I was at WBAI, the first day that I walked in there, first of all, the entire place smelled like a mixture of like really rancid body odor and weed. And there was a dude who was like he looked like my cousin Dick from the Munsters. He was just like a pile of hair. The mustache melded into the hair, but he was kind of like sleeping, and he had like some saliva going down his mouth. And I thought he was dead, or maybe like stereo. Anyway, I walk in and I'm smelling the weed and getting buzzed off the contact, and I said, I'm here to see Amy, and he said, who? And I thought, that's Amy Goodman. Oh my God, I've been listening to her for several years, and she's like my hero. He had no idea who I was talking about. Anyway, I never left that place for years and years. It was my first day there, and I became really good actually at sound editing, and I started volunteering on every show. I volunteered on the opera show to help them edit something. I would do anything, even if I didn't know anything about the content, just to learn the trade of audio editing. And so when we started this podcast, Intercepted, and that was back in 97, 98, when I started in radio, when we started the Intercepted podcast, there was a part of me that was really excited about the idea of going back into that world of sound. And Lital was hired by our parent company, First Look Media, to develop a number of podcasts. And this is by far the most, news, militant, political one that she's doing. She also has been hunting Richard Simmons lately, which, okay, that's your thing, it's fine, She did try to get me to do promos for that, and I'm like, I'm not doing a promo for a show about stalking Richard Simmons. I'm sorry, I just won't do it. I have journalistic integrity. But at the beginning, it's a very successful podcast, way more than ours. But Lital comes from a completely different orientation of interest and perspective and experience than I do. And at first, Lital kind of drove me absolutely fucking nuts, because I was like, is this person going to disagree with everything I want to do and like turn this show? I don't want, Sarah Koenig is great and I love Serial, but I don't want to be Sarah Koenig, and I don't want to be the NPR mug tote bag podcast. But I completely misjudged Lital, and now I adore Lital and realize that there's this necessity, I think, in our society, particularly at times like this, to always have a check on our reality from people that come from a different perspective. On the one hand, it keeps you grounded. On the other hand, it reminds you that you're at your most effective when you can communicate with a wider audience of people and not just exist within your bubble. And Lital really has, I think, elevated what we're doing on the show to a level that allows us to engage in a dialogue that we're hearing from a lot of people, and because of the stakes of what's happening with Trump being in power and the executive orders that he's passing, and now this declaration of war on the environment and the Muslim ban and the stakes for women and women's reproductive rights, that it's necessary that we have programs and publications and journalists and cultural figures that people can relate to and seek some comradely relationship with that unites all of us, even if we aren't physically meeting each other. And so part of what we've tried to do with our show, with Intercepted, is to not just have it be pummeling you with what my friend David Riker, who wrote Dirty Wars, the film with me, said, is a catalog of horrors. Because it's overwhelming, and everybody knows that it's completely, horribly fucked right now. But what is it that we do as people when fascistic movements take power? Number one, you resist. But number two, you have to protect the institutions that make us human. What makes us human? It's our ability to laugh and to have a sense of humor and to enjoy beautiful art and to appreciate the diversity of music that exists in our globe, and to read great works of literature and to be among each other and not just be people that are guided by the devices that we all carry around in our pockets, which are simultaneously surveying us and pumping us full of misinformation and corporate information and way too much information about who we're sleeping with and who they slept with and what our mom is doing at any given moment in the grocery store, because she's telling you in all caps that she found a deal on this kind of peanut butter. Anyway, That just came into my head. I'm sorry, and my mom actually has stopped putting Facebook in all caps, and she has a Twitter account. She still has the egg, but she's there. She hasn't quite graduated to Snapchat yet, and if something goes wrong with my dad, I think she maybe would go on Tinder, but my guess is they're going to stick it out until they death do they part. So it was really important from the very, very beginning that the show not just be, oh my God, here's the latest horror that you need to be outraged about, or here's this despicable policy that has just been implemented by the White House. We do all of that, but we also are inviting a diverse array of musical artists to, in some cases, perform original works on our show, but in a stripped down way. Most of them are a cappella. There have been some artists like the punk band from Pittsburgh, Anti-Flag, that recorded a song that is a really amped up electric song. They went into the garage of one of the band members and they recorded an acoustic version of their song Brandenburg Gate just for our show, and it focuses on the lyrics, on the message of what they're doing. And we've had just on today's show, we have the Bay Area hip hop artist who's a really legendary figure named Boots Riley, who his original group was called The Coup. More recently, he has a group called Street Sweeper Social Club with Tom Morello, who was one of the founding members of Rage Against the Machine. And Boots Riley did an a cappella version of his song Ghetto Blaster and updated it to change some of the lyrics to be about Donald Trump. And because he wrote it when Obama was president, and there was a reference in it to Bush, and he flipped it and put in, he jiggered the lyrics a little bit to make it about Trump. And there's something kind of awesomely subtle about what he did there, because it's basically the same shit, different administration, in some ways. But he didn't have to say, and I redid this song so that it was updated. He just did it, and he sent it into us. And we're having the artists just do it by recording it on their phones.
All right, it's only a minute left of this. I'm contemplating deepening the sky on the left and right upper portions there with a little bit of red. And then maybe I'll do a little more cloud embellishment as well. So I'm going to do a second take. Here we go.
The movie Juno, most famous for the band Moldy Peaches.
Okay, take 10.
You're a part-time lover and a full-time. That's how most people know about Kimmy Dawson. But her song was, sorry for singing, I'm a terrible singer. This is not karaoke night, and I promise you there will be no more singing from me the rest of the evening. But Kimmy Dawson did this, it was just a brutal, beautiful, soulful, into her iPhone rendition of a song about Black Lives Matter that also talked about the killing of black transgender women. And talked about the killing of people for allegedly selling loose cigarettes, and it was, my eyes welled up when I heard the rendition of that song that she sent into us, because you could hear her voice breaking, and also that she was sitting in her own house alone, recording this into her phone. And on that episode, when we aired the Kimmy Dawson piece, I said that that we are not just having musical acts on here to kind of give the show a little bit of oomph. We're doing it as a direct response to fascistic tendencies to want to stamp down on culture and cultural expression and artistic expression. And another thing that we've done is we are working with actors, and we're doing something that I really am excited about, and we've done I think 3 of them now. But we're producing radio dramas that are nonfiction, that are based on top secret documents provided to us by Edward Snowden. And so the first one that we did, which I can play you guys a little clip of if you can help me, was the incredible and very underrated actor Peter Sarsgaard, who is just an utterly brilliant actor. And he's been helping coordinate, he's sort of an unofficial staffer at Intercepted. But what we did with Peter was we took an NSA document about and this was provided by Edward Snowden. It is a top secret document, and it was about a guy who works for the NSA and gets sent down to the Guantanamo prison to participate in the interrogation of prisoners early on in the War on Terror, so-called War on Terror, and discovers while he's in Guantanamo, interrogating prisoners, that it's a fantastic place to go on a vacation. Like, as part of your official job, you get to also be on vacation in Guantanamo. So what we're going to play now is and you know that it has to be off this microphone because it is opposing, is verbatim. We did not change a word of this document. So here's Peter Sarsgaard starring as an NSA operative who goes down to Guantanamo to help interrogate prisoners and discovers it's an amazing place to hang out.
The interrogation focus at Guantanamo is strategic. Tactical questioning is accomplished in theater to see what they know, categorize them accordingly, and determine what requirements they can satisfy. The work can be extremely interesting, challenging, and very fulfilling. On a given week, the NSA LNO might put together intelligence to support an upcoming interrogation, formulate questions and strategies for the interrogation, and observe or participate in the interrogation. Afterward, the LNO captures and disseminates pertinent technical information gleaned from the interrogation back to the NSA. Outside work, fun awaits, opportunities abound. Water sports are outstanding. Boating, paddling, fishing, water skiing and boarding, sailing, swimming, snorkeling, and scuba. No experience, no problem. Learn how to operate a boat in a weekend. Become a certified open water scuba diver within weeks. If you've already mastered these skills, or once you do, the MWR Marina rents boats from pontoon party boats to Carolina skiffs to ski boats to kayaks. Recently, they've added sailboat rentals too. The local dive shop has all the gear and tips to ensure a perfect outing. Water sports not your cup of tea, but many other activities to round your day off. The library has 24 internet terminals and over 1,000 videos. Or take in a movie at the outdoor theater featuring a weekly variety of the latest releases. Other activities include pottery, hiking, nature walks, biking, paintball, martial arts, tennis, racquetball, basketball, softball, and bowling. There are also several swimming pools and gyms, or just relax and take in the warmth of the sun. If you would be interested in a TDY opportunity at Guantanamo Bay, please contact Redacted for more information.
So that's and it's actually a little bit longer than that, and it goes back and forth between interrogating prisoners and enjoying margaritas in the prison in Cuba. And we have this fantastic sound designer named Rick Kwan, who has been creating the images that you hear, and it's we also did one recently with another fantastic actor, Bill Camp, who many people probably know him as he played the cop on The Night Of, but he's a classically trained actor and all around just kind of awesome character actor, and we don't have that clip with us, but he's going to be a recurring character on the Intercepted podcast, playing a real-life person who works for the NSA, who writes a column for the NSA's secret newspaper. They have their own secret publication that you have to have a top security clearance to read, that's called SID Today, the Signals Intelligence Directorate Today. It is a classified newspaper, and NSA spies and others who work for the agency volunteer to be columnists or to write stories. And they write stories about, I went to help do drone strikes in Yemen, and when we were in Qatar, they have an amazing bazaar where you can buy, fake hookah pipes to bring for your kids. And by the way, we killed this person, this person, this person in our operation called Operation Shenanigans. True story. But Bill Camp plays the NSA philosopher. He was a guy who has he got an MFA before doing the NSA. Tried to write the Great American Novel and was rejected, and then joined the NSA, and when the opportunity came along to be the philosopher columnist for the NSA, he jumped at the opportunity, and it is the most self-important, obnoxious column you could possibly imagine. It's not even worthy of an undergraduate's attempt at explaining. He uses and you'll hear some occasional Kierkegaard from me. Who are you? Anyway, sorry if there's Kierkegaard fans here, but you guys should check that one out. It was I think it was last week's episode or the week before. So we're doing this with actors. We have some stuff coming up with Maggie Gyllenhaal and Marissa Tomei and a few other people. The other thing that we're doing that is not serious gloom and doom reporting, which is by far the bulk of our show, is we're working with this great comedian named Anthony Atamanuik, who is a Donald Trump impersonator. And he is a very good audio Donald Trump impersonator. So what I've been doing is rewriting iconic films to put Trump into the films as a character. So the first one that we played around with was from the film Apocalypse Now. The opening scene where the fan is there and you know Martin Sheen is looking up at the fan going around and he's still in Vietnam. And so we did a little twist on this. I think it was the third week of Trump's presidency where we put Trump in that bed in the hotel room, and this is that episode.
This is the end, beautiful friend. Washington. Shit. I'm still only in Washington. Every time I think I'm going to wake back up on the set of The Apprentice. When I was at Mar-a-Lago after the inauguration, it was worse. I'd wake up in the morning and there'd be nothing. I hardly said a word to my wife until I said yes to the divorce. When I was in D.C., I wanted to be at Mar-a-Lago. When I was there, all I could think of was getting back to Trump Tower and calling into Fox and Friends. Maybe Sean Hannity. I've been here 3 weeks now, waiting for a mission. Getting softer, smaller. Every minute I stay in the Oval Office, I get weaker. And every time some moron on Twitter calls me fuckface Von Clownstick, he gets stronger. I call my own shots, mostly on the accumulation of data. Each time I watch fake news, CNN, the wall's moving a little tighter. Everyone gets everything he wants. I wanted a mission. And for my sins, they gave me one. Brought it up like room service with a taco ball. It was a real choice mission. And when it was over, I'd never want another. Believe me.
This is Intercepted. Those have been fun to work on, and I think it's, for me, I've spent most of my adult life in war zones, documenting the suffering and deaths and tragedies of people who live on the other side of the barrel of the gun, that is American foreign policy. I started going to war zones in 97. I went to Iraq. 98 I went to Iraq, and I went to Nigeria, and then I covered the tail end of the wars in Yugoslavia, and then post 9/11 was just in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then once you get in that world where you're doing war reporting, it really fucks with your mind in a way that you only feel fully human. And this is, I think, relatable from people who've done this, but also people who have served in the military. You only feel like you're alive when you're in danger, and it messes with every aspect of your life. And you know, for me, the part of I started off wanting to be, first I wanted to be a middle school teacher, which probably would have been far more dangerous than going to war zones. And then I was living and working at a homeless shelter in DC, and I was listening to a lot of radio, and I was cleaning toilets and taking people to doctor's appointments. I had dropped out of college. I had never taken a journalism course in my life. It's funny because I was briefly enrolled at the University of Wisconsin. I'm from Wisconsin. And I say, when people say, oh, did you go to school at Wisconsin? I say, well, I was enrolled. Because I actually didn't physically go to the classes, and eventually that resulted in me not being allowed to go to any of the classes because I was kicked out of the university. But like a couple days ago, I got an invitation from the journalism department at the University of Wisconsin asking me to give this keynote lecture. And it's like, and they're like, you know, would you consider returning to your alma mater? I'm like, you better check the paperwork on this thing, because I did not go, and I would never have been able to get into that journalism program. But I'll go speak there, though. That'll be fun. And then so I got into journalism because I wanted to be involved with social justice struggles and the relationship between, you know, poverty in the United States and racism in the United States and violence in the U.S. and what we were doing around the world. And as I started to engage in a parallel education, parallel to the university system, I was a voracious reader and a vacuum cleaner of political writings of all stripes. And when I heard Amy Goodman on the radio, I said, I want to do that. That speaks to me. That's how I want to engage in this fight. So my gateway into journalism was not, I want a career as a journalist. I want to be the next, you know, Woodward and Bernstein. It was, this world has so many horrible things happening in it, and I want to be part of exposing that and part of telling stories of people who are prevented from having a voice, in part because of where they happen to live, but also because of the way that that the news media has been structured for a very, very long time in this country. And so I came into journalism and learned it as a trade, like you would learn to be a plumber or an electrician, rather than as a course of academic pursuit. And one of the things that I'm really interested in as I get a little bit older and I start to think about the state of journalism is the changes we need to make for how we approach education. And when people are in high school, they're asked to make these decisions that are going to dictate along the whole next part of their lives about, you know, your junior year, where are you going to go to college, where are you going to go to college? And it's like, I had no business going to college when I did. And I failed, spectacularly failed, but not because I was a screw up or you know, was stupid or, you know, lazy. It wasn't the right thing at that moment. Now I think I would love to be at a university. I think I would go to every class. Like I would love, for instance, to study economics. You know, I would love to do multiple language immersion courses. If I could start now, my God, I would love to go to, you know, a great university with an amazing library and awesome professors and lectures and absorb it all. But I wasn't ready for that when I did it. And I think that's the reality of a lot of young people, is they don't quite know what they want to do or who they want to be. And it's not that they are, you know, confused in some kind of a irresponsible way. It's just that you know, our brains aren't fully connected yet. You know, the frontal lobe is not connected to other parts of it. Your brain isn't fully formed. I say this, by the way, as the father of a 17-year-old. I read this great book called Yes, Your Teen is Crazy, and it's about the neuroscience, like how our brains develop. And it really isn't until you're like mid-20s that you become an actual rational person, just, you know, scientifically. But I think we should do away with the concept and this, that everyone should be going to a 4-year university and that paper is the most meaningful achievement that you can have with the 4 years following the finishing of high school. I think we should view some of the most meaningful roles in society as the product of apprenticeships, and giving people an ability to work among and with and around people who do what they want to do. I mean, I've been kind of unofficially studying both plumbing and electrical work because I had like a disaster happen in my house. So for the past 2 years, I've chosen to work with the guys who are fixing this problem in our building, and I'm learning the trade of being an electrician, and I've learned an enormous amount about plumbing to the point where I don't call a plumber anymore, and I know how to rewire things. It's amazing when you actually see somebody that's really good at something with their hands, and you also realize, my God, I'm spending so much money calling people to do this. It's not rocket science, but also there's something fulfilling about solving puzzles every day that I really got attached to. And for years I worked as a house painter before I got into journalism, and it was some of the best years of my life. Like when you work with your hands, when you live in the world, when your fingernails get dirty, you're alive, and you're among people, and you're the world of journalism now is a very cerebral, isolated environment because everyone is connected to their devices, and it used to be a profession of the working class. And that was, early newspapers, the idea of it was to kind of project to the working man, was part of the idea. And it's why the Daily News and the New York Post, as horrible and despicable as the New York Post is, and the Daily News actually has been in a little bit of a weird renaissance, but those are papers that you see so many working class people on the subways reading, but there's something to that shouldn't just be dismissed. There is a real value in our society to presenting information that's relevant to the lives of people. And I think
all right, I think that's a pretty good step. Starting to get a lot more play with the drifting clouds and fog. The lights a little more dramatic, a little more distance, atmospheric perspective developing across the depth of the buildings. I like the orangish red watermelon red kind of creeping in on the edges, kind of frames it in nicely and balances out some of the more dramatic coloration in the foreground.
And those guys in the Gulf War for CNN.
This one's getting closer.
He was literally the
I don't think it's there yet.
Who was getting their satellite.
I'd like to see a little more detail creeping into the elements in the foreground, maybe a little more dramatic shadowing. But I'm liking the middle and distance and top portion so far. So I'm going to let this sit up, think about it, and probably do a finishing session on the next session. So that's it for the moment, though. Thank you for watching. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting Death of a Salesman. Do a pan up and down here.
Reporting. And in a way, that's how I learned journalism, by first just absorbing radio, and then by
Closer.
Begging Amy Goodman to let me do anything
Definitely closer.
needed.
Oh, and for anyone into what's going on in the background there, I'm just kind of proofing Rick Strassman and Jeremy Scahill interview and lecture that were blocked by YouTube for reasons I'm not quite sure of. Might have been the intro and outro that I tacked to them. But so far so good on the redone versions, and they're both up on my channel on their lists of Rick Strassman and Jeremy Scahill. So, really good one. Intercepted is great. It's an old talk about his podcast when he first started it. And guy's got a good sense of humor as well as amazing journalistic skill, I guess you'd say.
Is burning in your heart. If you want to be a journalist, you have to do some introspection and say,
it's one of the few journalists on the air at all anymore that I pay attention to or trust for any kind of information, for the reason that he's honest and actually talks to the people that are just being slandered by the majority of others. So, on that note, have a good night, Earth.